2, 1. Hey there, welcome to the Inside Cafe with your host, 𝗖cie_𝗵𝗠. And today, I have my dear friends who are some of my favorite people on the planet, Tati and Max, and they are the creators of Couple Summit. And Couple Summit is a unique resource online just for couples. And it's unique because it combines authentic conversation, intimate challenges, deep introspection, and they empower couples to really build a holistic relationship that is divorce-proof, which I think is pretty darn cool. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, 𝗖𝗂𝗃.
Thanks, friend.
Did I miss anything about the intro about Couple Summit?
No, it's pretty solid.
All right. So I guess before we dive in, I have lots of questions about relationships. And
Okay.
I'd like to know how Couple Summit got started. What was the inspiration behind it?
So Couple Summit's origin story is a very personal one because we were actually doing long distance at the time. And yeah, I think you were in Seattle and I was in San Francisco, and I was about to graduate university, and my plan was to go off to Europe, be an artist in Berlin, and that whole thing. And then Max wanted to
live in a van with a dog and travel to all 50 states while working remotely. Like a laptop or something.
And so I don't know,
very different.
We really liked each other.
We did. But our futures had very different paths.
Yeah, and so we needed to figure that out. And so what we decided was during one of our reunion trips, we would go somewhere totally different,
very different,
a neutral ground, as you would say, and hash everything out. Like talk about, okay, what are your desires? What are your fears? What are your expectations? What are your plans?
Why Berlin? Why van?
Yeah. And we even went down into like, okay, how do you like envision like a good relationship? And what do you want out of a good relationship?
How many kids do you want?
Yeah, how many kids do you want? And how do you, like, what's the purpose of a wedding? You know, like everything. We hashed everything out for a relationship. And at the end of it, we decided, okay, we want to be together and we want to.
Well, we combined our dreams. Mine was I wanted to travel often. And Tatiana's was the Berlin thing was really about getting new experiences in a different, but like safe environment, which was Europe. And so we both moved to Europe and traveled around, moving as if we weren't in a van, but like moving like week by week, month by month together. And we called it the Couple Summit because we chose Quebec, Canada, because it was like one of the farthest places away from both Seattle and San Francisco. And at the same time, Putin, Merkel, Trump or Obama at the time were meeting and having the G7 summit, which is where all the superpower nations meet and talk about their futures. And so I remember when we looked at the newspaper, they're like, oh, that's not fair. If they get to talk about their futures and call it the summit, we might as well call ours the summit. And so that name just kind of became coincidental due to the super nations meeting up, talking about their futures right next door.
Yeah. And so we did that for the first year, and then we did the second year too. And we realized just like our relationship just got stronger and we felt closer each time we did it. And we're like, okay, I think we should share this with others. We should share this with other couples because I think they could benefit from this. And the other thing too is like we both came from like divorced families, and so we're like, I had a deep fear of commitment, and I think a lot of millennials can connect with that point because I was just like, okay, like what's the point of marriage if they all fall apart? And I really wanted to make it work, and I still want to make it work. And through Couple Summit, I feel so much confidence in our relationship. And what I've noticed, like from our few customers that have experienced it already, like they feel closer too. And so I'm just, that's the origin story there.
Thank you for sharing. That's so beautiful. Funny you should mention closeness because one of my mentors, Dr. George Pransky, he wrote a book called The Relationship Book Hand Guide, and it's my favorite relationship book.
Oh, I like that title.
Heard it?
I like that title.
Did I have it? Yeah. It's a small book. It's this one. Relationship Book Hand Guide. And it's very different than other ones because it talks about not having couples dive so much in their problems, but really focus on the closeness and have that be priority, which is very different than other modalities. So it's funny that you said closeness. So I'd like to ask you, in your experience in this journey, what have you seen of some like the things about relationships that everybody thinks is normal, but it's not true? Like, what are the premises about relationships that aren't healthy that you found in your work?
I would say definitely the romanticism of relationships, where it's love at first sight and the hard part is just finding the person to fall in love with, and then everything after that is easy, happily ever after. But the true love story like begins after that commitment. And the true work comes in for love, like the deeper part of love comes in when you put in the work, you put in the time, and you put in the effort to actually build a relationship, and not just assume that everything's gonna be fine because you found the one.
Right. You're like, thanks, notebook.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that, because and I reflect, and I was talking to a colleague named Rob Cook. Shout out Rob Cook. We speak a lot about unconditional love and his finding of that. And he said that, once you really touch that space of real authentic love, you see everything that isn't. I'd love for you to speak more to the work, because I think that if there's I think we have, I was working with a client and she was experiencing turbulence in her relationship, right? So I'm not a relationship coach, but oftentimes results lean into that, because what I do is, I help people have clarity of mind and like really work from that space of inspiration. And when you do that, you get results like better relationships. And so we had a cool conversation around turbulence, because she was experiencing worry, doubt, and fear in a relationship, but she had projected that to the whole relationship. It's like, oh, it's all going to hell. It's done. The house is on fire. And we had to really come back to now, like, you're just worried right now. 3 hours from now might look very different if you go for a walk. And I'd love for you to speak to that, because I think sometimes one of the challenges I see is we knee-jerk to reactions in relationships, because relationships are so trigger happy, because emotions are up and down, there's hormones, there's like, and I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, so when you're talking about turbulence, is it like conflict in her relationship?
Right, conflict, or things aren't going like you said earlier, like, this doesn't look anything like the notebook, something's wrong.
Yeah. And so, okay, I see what you mean.
You can hack that with the conflict curve.
Yeah, the conflict curve. So that's one of the things is, I think another misconception in relationships is like, oh, if you have conflict, then it's the whole relationship's bad.
It's done.
But, but conflict, we need to shift a lot of couples need to shift their mindset to see conflict as an opportunity to grow again closer together.
Statistically too, they proved, after looking at like the Gottman Institute in Seattle, Washington, they looked at 10,000 plus relationships, and couples that butt heads and actually argue with each other. Imagine the Italian movie, just passionately fighting with each other. They actually didn't have higher divorce rates or lower success than couples that fought less, because they actually were able to, sometimes they were even better at having longer, happier relationships, because they
had those conversations. And it's like, it's working through that turbulence. It's working through those challenges that you grow together as a couple.
But it's how you do it that's important.
Exactly.
Because if one of the partners is that fiery conflict kind of focused one, and the other one's avoidant, that won't work. You need to have a balance and figure out how you can work it together.
And how to have that how to have that dialogue together, because and that's one of the things that the tools that we give in the couple summit is for couples to figure out, okay, like, what is your conflict style?
Right.
And how have you experienced conflict in the past? Because, everything comes from our childhood. So it's like, okay, like when, for example, let's just use our relationship. Like when we first started dating, like my tendency when it came to conflict, I would just run. I just leave. I'd be like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to have the silent treatment, right? Like,
she literally ran for a hill once.
Really?
And
a hill.
So I was
found her.
very avoidant of conflict. And and so I had to learn to turn inwards to him and turn inwards to what the actual problem was. And usually it's not what the actual relationship is, it's just an issue. And that's another misconception too, is like we tend to place like maybe like a mistake our partner did for their entire character. But if we just realize, oh, it was just a mistake and we can work through it, or it's something external like finances or something like that, it's a time to actually problem solve versus turning against each other. And so conflict is an opportunity to turn inwards to each other and like work this problem out.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, in my work, we call it to reflect. To me, it's having the clarity of mind to see the innocence through it. Like if I may reflect, like your running was of no reflection on Max, but it was simple, your reaction to what was going on in your head, right?
Yeah.
And for some, I think it's really important for a partner to see through that. I think when you see through someone's thinking, you naturally have compassion for them, because it's not like, oh, screw you, you ran away. It's, oh, you're afraid. Like, I know what it's like to be afraid. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A lot of empathy.
A lot of empathy. But it's so interesting to me to see how empathy comes naturally when you have more clarity. Like, you don't get more angry. You're like, oh wow, like I've been afraid too, and I know what it's like. And like, okay, so I'd like to ask you, what allowed you to shift from running and avoidance to more introspection and reflection? What helped you do that?
I think it was seeing like your understanding of wanting to understand this, and that you actually cared, and that you wanted to put in the work, and it made me also want to put in the work too, and also realize that it was, I don't know if I can cuss, but like it was not a nice thing to do, to run away, because I saw how it hurt him as well, when he wanted to draw in closer. And I think it turned into, I had to do major self-work for sure. And that's why we're big proponents of therapy too. It's just, I had to figure out like, hey, why is it my gut reaction to run away from conflict? And a lot of it stems from childhood, so we don't have enough time to go into that today. But
that's another episode.
That is another episode. But it was, going deep into the archives and figuring out, okay, I do this because I am afraid of being hurt. And so I would run away, and I'd run away from the conflict because, okay, like he doesn't care. But then when I realized he does care, and you put in the effort to reach out to me, and that changed a lot of my mindset as well. I don't know, what did you see?
Yeah, I felt it. It definitely is nice to be on the receiving end on that. It feels like she was unraveling like armor that I didn't see originally, but when it's gone, you go, whoa, that's you. And you as you progress through a deeper relationship, you're always unraveling it. And that was one of the goals of the Couple Summit, is how could you concentrate those moments where you can help a couple almost come together and just start stripping all their skins, their shields, their armors, their cloaks, and be raw with each other as soon as possible. We tried to, because usually it's a labyrinth to do that. Like, let's say someone has trauma from childhood, normally with like parents or
they didn't know trauma that they didn't know they have, that they're reacting to.
Exactly. Right. And so you might be triggering it. And so that's definitely happened with us, where I might say something that has nothing to do with really anything that is of a hot topic or a pushy subject, but because of its historical significance to her that I didn't know about, all of a sudden, boom, run for the hills. And then I'm like, what do I do? And so it's about getting into that. Yeah.
And so actually that, it reminds me of like one more event that like kind of like leads to the whole unraveling situation, which was when you talk about building walls, like through just like from childhood to adulthood, we like continue to build these walls because like people hurt us and whatnot, and we realize, okay, not everything's like nice. And then it was the moment that I allowed you to see me cry for the first time. And you actually came to comfort me. And because I was like raised to learn, like, okay, you don't cry, you don't show emotions in front of people. Right. And then when I was having like one of my panic attacks in like university, he came to my bidding because my roommate was like, yo, you gotta come over, Max. And after that moment when I was like, okay, it's okay to cry in front of this man. And not only is it okay to cry in front of this man, but he will also let me cry into his arms. And it's not a sign of weakness. And that's like when my walls just started to slowly break down with him. Yeah.
That's really cool. And reflecting to that, it's almost like it does seem like a natural process, because Max wasn't trying to break down your walls. He was showing up love. And that was really cool. I have a question for you, Max. How did you, because there's this other side too, when you meet with challenges like that where somebody runs, I think another premise is to take it really personally. Am I not good enough? This person's leaving. Am I not in, like, for me, what comes up is not enoughness, right? Because I think our logical brains kind of screw us over. It's like, oh, this person runs. Obviously, you're a piece of shit. Like, that's the only logical explanation, right? And I love this conversation because it really points to the truth, which is that it's so far from the truth, even though it's like, you're a terrible person, that's why this person's left.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to speak to that and how you, how did you see that and how did you experience that?
Of course. I think I was lucky to have, I was raised with a lot of like females in my life. So sisters. And,
me too, yeah.
And I had a mom as well as a stepmom and grandmas, and I was always very close to the females in my life, as yourself, you were saying, and it created a different kind of sense of empathy for me that I don't think I would have been able to have. And so I think when I see my close guy friends who maybe had a more heavily male dominant like raising, figures and stuff in their life, they definitely show up to things like their battles all the time. So like in that situation there, I don't know why I have this like imagery in my head, but it's like in the movies when you see someone show up to fight the big boss or whatever, and the main character starts taking off all their armor and they let go of their lightsaber or whatever. Yeah. And they walk like, they will basically walk like weaponless and shieldless. And everyone else thought that was the worst thing in the world to do. The male alpha brute force, like, no, she's running away because she's a failure and like she won't acknowledge that we need to do it. No, that wasn't it. It was, I'm gonna take off all this armor, I'm gonna take off all my shorts. I'm not gonna say you're wrong, I'm not gonna say I'm right, I'm not gonna say whatever the situation, I'm just gonna be there for you. And then that was like how everything kind of changed. I was like, whoa, felt very cool. And it definitely unearthed a whole new level of a relationship to expose that. Vice versa, like myself doing it for her.
Yeah. That's cool. The image comes to mind as like transformation through fire.
Wow. Yeah.
My next question is something you said earlier, which I think a lot of people probably deal with both consciously and unconsciously, is fear of commitment. I'd love for you to both unpack that to me. Like, what does it look like to you?
So, fear of commitment. I think the other thing about just relationships these days too is we have so much choice and so much freedom to choose whoever we want. And because like marriage in the past, it was a very logical thing. It was a logical contract to do. Like, we're going to combine families to increase familial wealth, and your dad's gonna give my dad a bunch of cows, you know, like that's like, and it was for like societal safety, to keep, that is a social contract to keep everybody together. And your parents usually decided for you. Like, okay, you're gonna marry this person, you're gonna marry this person. But nowadays we can choose whoever at the swipe of our fingers, however many miles away. And so there's this kind of agency of like, okay, FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like, oh, if you choose this one person, could you be 5% happier with another person?
Yeah.
And you always wonder, like, is this enough? Like, am I making the right choice? And like, did I choose the right person? And
right, especially when shit's going downhill.
Exactly.
Right.
And the truth is, there is no perfect person. There is no the one.
Oh, it's so
And
good.
there, you have to choose, not you have to choose, but it's like, to get over that fear of commitment, I think, was to realize, okay, instead of looking at all the good aspects of this person, look at all the bad sides. Like, look at the shadow side of this, like the shadow side of like their traits, like, and figure out, like, are you willing to work with that for the rest of your life?
Can you expand on shadow side?
Oh yeah, sorry. So basically, like,
I know Nikon knows.
Yeah. We talked
well,
about
maybe
this.
someone who has no idea what that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for every good trait, there's the other side of the coin, which is like the shadow side of that trait or that person. And so I'll just use me, for example. So I am more like creative and like free-spirited, lofty, whatever. But the other side of that is that I'm kind of unpredictable and I procrastinate and I don't know what a deadline is. And that might drive someone like Max crazy because he's very analytical, organized, and like, if I just showed you his storage, it was just everything's labeled and everything's put together, and I'm just a mess. And but the shadow side of Max, though, is that he can come off as like really critical and anal and like, and so it's like, okay, how are you willing to work with this other side of this person? Are you willing to work through their negative traits and love them because of it too? And so when you're choosing a partner, it's not choosing them for all the sunny sides, but okay, like, what type of person am I willing to go through the shit with? Like, what type of person am I willing to go through the hard times with? Yeah.
Right. And then there's, so if I can reflect, to me, fear of commitment, it's a lot of thinking, right? And in my world, we call it a lot of invisible rules. Like, given that one of my mentors, Mike O'Neill, he posted a podcast and it was really cool. And it came from him and a conversation with one of his coaches, 𝗵𝗂𝗺, and it's titled, "Would you sign that contract?" And the contract is, at the level of, like, in what we're talking about, I imagine the contract would be, if I get afraid enough, I will run always. But like, would you sign that contract? Right. And like, when you can see it, it's like, okay, what are you really running from? And to me, what I'm seeing in this is, I think a fear of commitment is almost, or it's going to go left, it's almost a fear of self. Like fearing yourself of what would happen if you did open yourself up to this deep level of love.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And it's, to me, it's kind of not a heartbreak, but it's like, it's simple and it's not. It's simple to see it. Like, once you see the contract, you're like, wait, I wouldn't sign that contract. But if you don't see it, everything looks hella scary.
Yeah.
And so, to reflect further, what I'm hearing from you is, if you're really afraid of commitment, is to really not tools and techniques for overcoming fear, but it's really more like reflecting on, well, let's unpack this for myself. Why am I afraid of? What is this fear made out of? What am I really running from?
Definitely. In a world that is always trying to grab our attention more and more, and like Tati was saying,
right? And it's kind of
away.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up. Like, oh, you're having problems in your relationship? Swipe right. You know, like,
you're 30 seconds away from cheating on anyone. You know, it's ridiculous. And so, it's that attention of combining, taking your attention and reflecting. So when everything else is asking for your attention, either give it to yourself or give it to your partner.
Right.
Because Tatiana always says, and like one of the foundations of the couple summit is like attention is love. It's the number one key, you know, like that's the one sentence, put it on a billboard,
Right.
and let everyone see it. And if you give yourself the attention to reflect, you're going to find all those clauses that you were talking about on the contract. And that's what looking at a contract is contract lawyers, they have a lot of attention focus, you know?
Right. And what occurred to me, and I think one of the beautiful things that you're really offering is you're offering a whole new level of intimacy. So I'm not speaking about physical intimacy. I'm speaking about a deeper level of connection and closeness, because that's reflection is the price of entry. Closeness is the payoff.
Wow. Yeah, that's nice.
Right. And the deep
use
closeness that, yeah, what I said. You can borrow it. But it's true, right? I'm seeing that fresh now. It's, you know, closeness is so available always, but the price is you got to slow down and reflect.
Yeah.
And you can't buy it in a store. It takes work. And to speak to what you were speaking to, Tatiana, what I see is something you said. I had it a second ago. It was about, I spoke about it with Rob Cook too, and he said that, you know, when you can really be yourself at all levels, or, you know, when you let your partner be themselves at all levels, you can be yourself at all levels. And I just realized now, like, how I can see how if you walked around only trying to be a certain way around a partner that you're around a lot, like that can get frustrating. And multiplied by 5 years, that might start to crack at some point. Could you speak to that? Because I do think, and to what you're both speaking to, is like with the premises, it kind of forces us to be a certain way rather than be who we really are in relationship.
Yeah.
Like, are you saying that like we should act like we act a certain way in a relationship versus who we
Right.
are?
Or especially I think in the beginning, right? Like people might come to
Yeah.
couple summit, they're like, I am my
Yeah, you
best
put
self
up that-
always. You know, like I'm
Yeah.
shiny. I'm like, yeah, but you ain't.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, go for it.
When Tatiana and I first started dating, I had a very like lucrative business going on, and I kind of carried as if that was forever me, you know, like you're doing, like I was doing really well selling stuff online, and I was making good money, and that was kind of the veil, or that was what I was going to wear. Look at me, I'm always making money, this is great. And then like after we started dating, the gold mine went dry. And the particular Amazon selling business I was doing was no longer working. And so I had to look at myself and be like, I'm not this successful entrepreneur anymore. Now like shit's getting really hard. And it took a long time to like actually let her know that and be clear, because like I kept the kind of the guys going. I kept the, you know, nice dinners, the like fancy outings, and it wasn't until I had my own version of breaking down in front of her and being like, I'm not doing well right now. Like I'm failing as a business person, and it sucks. And but as soon as I did that to her, I felt even more connected.
I think that's huge. I think for everybody, I want to say guys' perspective, but I realize it's for everybody in that I think there is a premise of tying your value to your bank account, especially if that's what you think you bring to a relationship, then you're kind of fucked. Because that goes, like, bank accounts go up and down, right? Like that seems natural. But if your value to the relationship is tied to that, like you're screwed from the get-go. So I think that's also a really important conversation for both people, almost. Like what I'm seeing is what's crucial. I'd love for you to speak to that. There's a question in here somewhere, but you know what I mean? It's like, what do you both really bring to the table? Like, is it like, and seeing that the value of character, perhaps, like.
And that's the point of these conversations, is to like unravel all like the underlying meanings of the major, what would you call it? Like the major things that affect a relationship. And that's a lot. So it's like, okay, like money, as we were talking about, is one of the number one reasons like why couples have conflict or even have a divorce, is they have communication and misunderstandings about money. And they don't have the conversation. Okay, like, what does money mean to you? How do you identify with money? Like, and what is success to you? And also figuring out, okay, like, how can we keep our relationship stable even if our finances are not? And money will always come and go, but you need to have each other's backs, especially when the money's going out the door and things are not stable.
Right.
And don't let it get in between you guys. And that's hard.
What I'm seeing in kind of what you get and what Couple Summit offers is almost permission to have those conversations, because it seems to me that when you don't, a lot of thinking gets piled up on thinking and it just turns not nice.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of go back to like the fear of commitment thing. Is so like when you actually do take the time, or you make the step to commit to somebody, you make the step to commit to a relationship. And what commitment allows, it allows all of those layers to melt away, and for the relationship to grow, and for each of y'all to put in the effort to build and cultivate a beautiful relationship. Like, a long-term relationship gives this amazing gift of time. Like, you guys have the time to learn about each other, like, what are your fears, what are your desires, and you guys help each other become the best versions of yourselves. And you get the time to learn about each other's bodies, each other's minds, each other's souls, and you wouldn't have that if you changed every relationship every year, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, there's one hand is like the fear of commitment, but it's like, okay, what would happen if you did commit? What would happen?
The other side of it, right? It's like,
what would
I think
happen to let it grow?
It's almost like something your soul craves. Or I think that everybody craves, like I think another friend, Miriam, said, you know, we all want to feel like we belong. And to me, relationships is one of those places where it's like the ultimate belonging, a place you can really be yourself with another human being.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you about another habitual thing, which I think is present in relationships, is the idea of projection, where we're couples, especially when they're in low moods, tend to project their insecurities onto their partner. And I'd love for you to speak to like what that is, perhaps what are the damages that can do, and kind of how can couples handle that? Like what can they see? What do you see about that would help them to not overcome that?
You take it? Well, one of the things is...
So what is it first for people who might not understand what projection is?
So projection is when you project like your own issues or your own fears or even desires on to another person. And so you think they also want the same thing, or they also feel the same thing, or they're also thinking the same thing.
Or they're failing at something.
But you don't know that for a fact. And
it's really toxic in relationships because the other partner can't read your mind. And so someone just comes out of left field and just says, you're, you know, you don't care about me enough. You don't care about this. And what you might not know is they're actually projecting that they feel like they're not giving you enough. And it's super toxic because then it like, it's not, you're having the wrong conversation at that point. And
like it's only tackling the surface. Like it's not going to the underlying issue, which is usually with themselves.
Yeah. So that's where the right conversations come in. So like as a partner, I want to, Tatiana deserves incredible credit for this. Is I project more, a lot more than she does. And she's really good at asking the right questions. So like, if I'm like, you're not working enough, say for the couple summit or something else, or like, did you get any work done today? Like, it's like loaded question, you know, after a hard day. What I'm really saying is like, I'm feeling insecure about myself. And so she'll she won't like turn it immediately and reflect the power mirror and beam it right back at me and make me feel like crap. No, she'll kind of play into it a little bit, you know, so at least we can diffuse that. And then, oh, it's time. Time is the value where it comes is slowly, progressively. Hey, are you okay? What's going on? What was your day like? You know, were you able to get anything done? And it's like stretched out, and Tatiana's really good at this kind of long kind of boomerang curve to bring back the focus and be like, what's really going on here? But she does it over a period of time without triggering basically that initial fire, that maybe that conflict kind of mode we have.
Yeah, that one's crucial when it comes to conflict. It's just, yeah, letting it cool down first, come to a stable place, and then have the dialogue. Versus me attacking her, being like, "Oh, what do you mean?" Like, asking me like what I worked on today. You know?
I think that's really important too, especially in conflict. And I think that's like probably 99.9% of what I tell my clients, like when they're in the thick of it, is like, the first thing you need to do is settle. And they're like, no, we got to handle this right fucking now. I'm like, that's the last thing you need to do right now. Like, we need to settle, because it's when you're in it, you're not seeing or thinking straight. And especially if it's something as important as your relationship, trying to navigate that when you're drunk is not helpful.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Right. And so what would you say, like, what would you say about projecting? Because it's something that kind of, I think if it's kind of unconscious too, right? Like, even though you know it, but you don't see yourself doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so what can help people with that? Okay, here's a good one. How do they know they're off track?
I think if they're upset about something, really think about like what they're upset about. Are they upset at the current situation? Are they upset at their partner for doing something? And take the time before they react and attack.
The real problem.
Yeah, just take a breath and figure out a way to articulate what the issue is, and make sure that whatever the issue is, to make it really specific, and not just like a generalized issue. Like for example, like let's say Max would be like texting during dinner, and then a generalized issue would be like, you're always ignoring me. Where if I changed it, I'd be like, okay, I feel, instead of being like a you statement, like attacking Max for you're always ignoring me, and changing the phrasing
to avoid you statements.
Yeah, and then changing the statement to I. So like, I feel ignored when you're texting during dinner. And that's a very specific issue that can be solved, versus you're always ignoring me.
And it's such a small nuance, but we were talking about that kind of when you're in the anger, fiery mode, and we're making it seem like someone turns into the Hulk, but no, it's not really what happens. But even just like the little bit of like when you're in that conflict mode, that slight nuance completely kind of like sneaks past kind of erupting the situation.
Yeah.
So those are really key, those little things.
Because I think, sorry.
No, so what I'm hearing from you is just how kind of self-awareness is so key here, right? Like, if you're angry and upset, you're probably drunk on fear, doubt, insecurity, and you're not seeing straight, you're thinking straight, should not decide and make any major life changes or decisions. And I think it's really helpful because, you know, if you're drunk, you wouldn't get in a car and drive home. You'd get in a cab. That's just obvious. But I think what's not so obvious here is when you're really angry and upset and livid, you're drunk. Like, on not nice thinking and emotions. And there's another thing too that you said too, Max. And also you, Tati, it's what I heard from both of you is like, you're not afraid of it. You're not afraid of the anger, but you're more curious. Like, why am I upset about this?
Yeah.
That seems to be a good start. And I'm like, hold up, why am I pissed off? You know?
Yeah, like approaching conflict with curiosity versus, what do you call it? Aggressiveness. Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like that's really cool. I saw that fresh in that there's approaching your partner with aggressive fear, doubt, and insecurity is like, I don't see any scenario where that would be helpful. I rarely do always, but that seems to me to be an always. Like that just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And whereas curiosity does seem to be more opening and more expansive of, why am I upset about this? I think that split second is freedom.
Yeah, because at the end of every conflict, there is no right or wrong or winner or loser, because if there is a winner, everyone loses. And the goal of every conflict should be to reach an understanding and for both sides to feel heard at the end of the day. Okay. That's it. And hopefully reach a compromise.
So that's beautiful. And so as we kind of hone in on time here, I want to ask you, in your work, and I've asked you this before, and I remember the answer, but I would love for you to speak to it, is how do you know you're on track as a couple? Like in your work, what have been the kind of the key indicators that the couples that do make it, the couples that do go the distance?
Well, going off the conflict, they know how to have a healthy conflict. They know how to manage.
They know they have conflict, right?
Yeah, they know how to manage it really well.
Navigate it.
Yeah, and then they also are very clear. They understand each other's expectations. Their needs, and what they really want out of life. And
the expectation one. Sorry, before I move on real quick. Expectations is so big, and I talked to a judge who oversees divorce law every day, and they said the number one reason why they see divorce is people have missed expectations about what they're getting into. And so to know if you're on track as a couple, you need to have clearly defined what the hell that track even is. Right. And what are the markers? Are we doing meters? Are we doing hot dogs? What's the measurement?
5 hot dogs. Good job, honey.
We're doing great, babe. We're 5 hot dogs.
It's like hot dogs. I was measuring by pineapples.
What? Exactly.
Yeah,
miscommunication and expectations. And so just really being clear about that. And the only way to be clear about that is having a conversation about your expectations and defining those really clearly. And then autonomy is like still maintaining a strong sense of identity of yourself, and your partner has of theirs. So you guys don't morph into one. Like you guys are a couple and you guys are together, but you guys have still a clear sense of like who you are, what you want, and your needs, and your partner has theirs. And respecting that separateness. Because one of the things that the sex therapist 𝗖cie𝘂𝗽𝗶 talks about all the time is like separateness is necessary for connectedness. And desire can only be created from being apart. Like for a fire to grow, you need air,
there's that going off the 𝗖cie𝘂𝗽𝗶 thing, there's something very like intimate and I don't know, like sexy about the unfamiliar. And the more you are focused on developing yourself, becoming a better person and changing, and that's one of the things I think a lot of people have wrong is like, oh, you've changed as a partner. That's good. That's you're always going to change as a person. You should help each other change to be what they want to be. And the more you change, what'd she say? Like you're essentially going to be spending the rest of your life just trying to figure out who the hell this person is and enjoy that.
And you never will.
You never will, and accept that. So never assume that, oh, you've never changed or anything like that, but rather be curious to see and watch the nuances of how they change and be intrigued by the unfamiliarities.
And the other exciting part too is like, because of these changes, like that marriage to that one person is gonna feel like a marriage to 10 different people throughout your lifetime.
Right.
And it's starting to evolve with those changes.
That's a really beautiful thing, because I think it knocks on another premise of like fear of change, right? Like things need to be the same, and what you're pointing to is how change is actually points to what my mentor Michael Neal said, like humans are moving targets. Like we're not inanimate objects. And so we're going to change and your partner is going to change. And if your premise, if you're going into a relationship thinking they're never going to change, you're in for a bad time.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. There's another one that you didn't say, but you told me in another conversation where you said respect. Like you've noticed that couples who do go the distance, like that's a pillar in the relationship. I'd love for you to speak to that as well. Like, what do you mean respect?
So respect is, respecting each other and respecting or acknowledging the power that you have over the other, and or the influence, not over, like respecting the respecting the, why can't I use this word? Because the opposite of respect is contempt.
And contempt is the #1 indicator of divorce. That one's scientifically proven too, again by the 𝗂𝗏𝗏 Institute in Washington.
And so contempt is like the lack of respect of each other. Like you either see your partner as below you or above you, and you guys aren't sharing the power. And when you have full respect, you guys see each other as equals. You guys understand the influence you have over each other's lives and over your decisions. And when respect is cultivated and just like treated well throughout the relationship, that's a super strong sign that this relationship's going to do well.
It's almost like, it's funny as you talk about it, right? And this goes back to what we're saying is these things are common sense, but they're not commonly used, especially like if you're caught up in insecurity, doubt, and fear. Like, respect is like the last thing you're on your mind. But if you can really see that and kind of like Dr. Pransky talks about is make closeness, and I imagine closeness as respect and compassion a priority. It's almost like the small, like the conflict becomes small things because that's not the priority, because the priority is our closeness. Cool. There's something else you spoke to, you just now, and I'd love for you to expand that, where you said separation is, what did you say? You said separation is part of the design, or you said separation is?
It's like, it's necessary.
It's necessary. I'd love for you to speak that, because I think when you said separation, I was like, oh. But I was curious, like why? Like why is my like knee-jerk reaction like, oh. But I felt like there's truth in that.
Yeah, well, like there's that that's like romanticism speaking, it's that knee-jerk reaction to be like, no, we need to be one, we need to become
always
like, you're like, you're the other half to my whole or whatever, my better half. But no, you are a whole and he's a whole, and your partner, you guys have been and will always be separate. When you guys met, you guys were separate individuals, and that's how it will always be. And
you're not halves.
Yeah, you're not halves. And another issue that I see people come into time and time again when they go into a relationship is they start letting go of that individuality. They start changing their needs, start dressing like their partner, like they start trying to become and change for the relationship. But the more you do that, and then 50 years down the line into the marriage, you realize, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want. I don't know what my dreams are. And then you start to disdain and even hate the relationship, but also hate your partner because of it. And so that's why separateness is so necessary, is to realize, okay, I fell in love with this person because of their unique qualities, of how they see the world, what they love, what they aspire to do. And they fell in love with you because of your uniqueness and your special qualities and how you see the world. And if you merge too closely to that, you don't want to date yourself. That just becomes like a Kanye nightmare situation. It's like, and so what was the other thing that she said? It was like, when you have this sense of feeling like you know everything about this person, you start, that desire, that curiosity to try to even like love this person and care for this person diminishes, because you're like, okay, you start to take your partner for granted, and that no one wants to be taken for granted. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
No,
anything else you want to add?
So what I'm hearing from you is that if it's almost like it's the premise, right? It's the premise like, no, separation bad, not romantic. But if you can see that it's a natural part of the process, like fire needs air. And sometimes, like the image always comes to mind, like the double helix, it's like you come boom and sometimes you have to go up and then you come back again.
Yeah.
And sometimes the separation, what I'm hearing from you is there's introspection in that time apart does help you reflect. And well, actually, let's make it real. Have you both gone through that?
Which part?
The separation part, or what you're speaking to?
Yeah. So I think like, you gonna start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So like in the beginning of the relationship, I remember, I think it was like when we first started going to Europe too, like I started to do a lot of the things that Max did, and even started doing like the same work that he did. And I noticed there was just like this tension between us, like, okay, like I started to lose a sense of who I was. And I think I started talking like you too, and you hated that. And so it was, I think it was like the second or third summit that we did together. We're like, okay, we got to take a step back and reevaluate like who I am, who you are, what I want, what you want, and to respect that and respect each other's goals and dreams and respect each other's work,
and to do your own and to go in your own separate way. Not necessarily separation in the sense of separation of a relationship or anything like that, but so a hack to that, I'll be the one to always give the like little cheesy practical mini takeaways. A hack to do that double helix approach is have a daily or weekly agenda that creates that separation. So for Tatiana and I, that's separate mornings. We don't spend the mornings together. I'll go walk or maybe listen to a podcast or maybe get some work done. And then, I don't know, Tati does her own thing. And there's beauty in that. So then when we meet for lunch, there's all this tension from the day that has already begun, and we have an invigorating lunch because it's like, what are you up to?
Right.
It's really nice.
Yeah, it's bringing something new to the table every day.
Okay. Well, that's really beautiful. So as we're coming up on time, I'd love for you to share, if Couples Summit could give a gift to couples who are working through stuff, or couples who want to be stronger, what would you give? Or what, it could be an insight or something practical. What would you give as a gift?
Nice question. Give me a moment.
Well, right now, I think a lot of us we've been stuck in either stuck in place, shelter in place for the last couple months to years. It feels like years and years, with COVID, and other nations are slowly opening up, and Thailand maybe sometime eventually. But point is, we all have this suspense in our head that we're gonna go do things. We're finally gonna make that trip. I think that I'm hearing this language a lot in friends and relationships, which is, I'm finally going to Greece, or I'm finally gonna scuba dive, or we're finally gonna start that business. Everyone's secretly planning their stuff right now. Like, oh, while COVID's going on, I'm gonna go into the lab and get all this stuff done. And so for me, my advice would be, before the whole world opens up, before you open up as a relationship, really sit down and try to figure out, consider this your last chance to get together, plan things out, really, really define what you want to do, really, really clearly understand. You've had all this time to sit and reflect. Now, what direction are you going to go in? So if we've all been in our caves for the last couple, you're in your cave right now, we're in our cave right now, we've all been in the caves. What's the first direction that we're going to put our foot in? And to sit and figure that out, I think would be really helpful for people at this time. What about you?
I like that. I would say it's just the same core of Couple Summit, which is pay attention. So pay attention to And when you pay attention, it is love. So like pay attention to how you love, how you like to give love, receive love, how your partner likes to give and receive love. Pay attention to what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel like you. Pay attention to what makes you feel most loved by your partner, and talk about it and take action upon it and do something about those things. Like, pay attention to create more of the life that you want to live.
And a tension exercise you can do to get that going in the relationship as well is go on a walk by yourself or with your partner and just don't have your phone, don't be distracted by anything, don't listen to anything, and just like look for birds that you've never looked for. Look, pay attention to cars driving by, people watch. Because when you're people watching, you're actually practicing the act of attention focusing. And you'll realize, oh, we've been numb for a while, especially when we go from point A to point E commuting. We commute in our own lives too. So pay attention is a little micro exercise.
I remember a teacher, Scottish mystic Sid Banks, and he has a cool saying about that. He says, when in doubt, go home. And not home like home, but home within, which is what I'm hearing from you is like get present. Like when in doubt, get present. Yeah. Cool. Well, this has been lovely. I'd love for you to tell us where can we hang out with you or find you or get in touch with Couple Summit.
So you can find us on our Instagram at Couple Summit or our website, 𝗂𝗑pplesummit.org.
And all the links will be below. All right. So if you've listened to this and you found this helpful, please share it to people who might be able to benefit from it. And again, Tati and Max are some of my favorite human beings on the planet. They're super cool. And I highly, highly recommend spending time with them. Your life will be better for it.
And life is better with 𝗂𝗂𝗃.
Hell yeah. All right, y'all. See you later. All right. Bye.
Thank you
Thank you so much, friend.
Bye.
Bye.